The parking lot hummed with the stillness of midnight, a quiet so deep it seemed to breathe, but it was the abrupt, shattering crack of a glass bottle that snapped Malik Turner out of his weary reverie, his spine stiffening as if jolted by a live wire. Malik, 40, leaned against the hood of his beat-up old junker, a rusting relic parked crookedly under the dim halo of a flickering street lamp, his dark hands methodically counting a pitiful handful of crumpled dollar bills, his night's earnings from a grueling shift at Carver Mart. His faded janitor's shirt hung loose on his frame, patched at the elbows, soaked with the faint tang of sweat and bleach, when suddenly Mr. Rawls, white, burly, and reeking of authority as the store's owner, stumbled out of the shadowy bar across the lot, his polished loafers scuffing the asphalt as he smashed an empty whiskey bottle against the curb in a drunken flourish. "You get your lazy ass out of my way." Rawls slurred, his voice slicing through the damp air like a whip, his bloodshot eyes narrowing with a familiar, venomous disgust as they locked onto Malik. But in that raw, electric moment, as the shards glittered under the streetlight like jagged stars, Malik caught a fleeting glimpse. A set of car keys slipping from Rawls' pocket, tumbling to the ground with a soft clink, and in the open glove box of Rawls' sleek sedan, the unmistakable glint of a pistol's barrel flashed in the moonlight. What had begun as a mundane pause to count his pay transformed into a pulse-pounding flare of danger, a spark that would soon ignite a deeper reckoning under the unforgiving glare of the lot's sodium glow. Malik Turner was more than just a night worker. He was a survivor etched into the gritty fabric of Carver Heights, a 31-year-old black man who'd carved a life from the scraps of a world that rarely offered him a fair shake. His hands, rough and dark as the oak trees lining the Heights' cracked streets, bore the scars of years spent mopping floors, scrubbing counters, and hauling trash. Jobs that paid just enough to keep the lights flickering in the single-wide trailer he shared with his wife, Tasha, and their son, Jaden, a bright-eyed 10-year-old with dreams bigger than their cramped quarters could hold. Malik wasn't a man of grand ambitions. He didn't dream of riches or fame. His aspirations were simpler, quieter, to keep Jaden in school, to spare Tasha the worry lines deepening on her face, to hold onto the rusted-out Chevy that groaned like an old friend each time he turned the key. That Chevy was his throne, a battered kingdom parked at the edge of Carver Mart's lot, its gas fumes a faint perfume in the air he breathed, a lifeline tethering him to a job that kept hunger at bay. Carver Heights wasn't a place for dreamers. It was a battleground of resilience, a patchwork of sagging trailers and peeling row houses where folks like Malik scratched out a living under the weight of a city that seemed to forget them the moment it turned its back. The Mart was his nightly proving ground, a squat fluorescent-lit box where he stocked shelves, swept aisles, and dodged the sharp tongue of Mr. Rawls, the white store owner whose chain of marts stretched across the county like a spider's web. Rawls was a man of means, his broad shoulders draped in tailored suits, his voice a booming command that echoed through the store, his authority as unyielding as the concrete walls Malik scrubbed clean each night. To Rawls, Malik was invisible, a grunt, a shadow in a faded uniform, not a man with a name, a family, or a story worth hearing. "Move faster, Turner. You're slower than mud." Rawls would snap, his words laced with a disdain Malik had heard too often in his life, a disdain that stung like salt in an open wound but never broke his quiet resolve. That frosty December midnight, Malik lingered in the lot after his shift, the air biting at his knuckles as he counted his tips, $12 and change, a meager haul that wouldn't stretch far enough to cover the week's groceries, let alone the gas to get Tasha to her cashier gig at the dollar store across town. He leaned against the Chevy's hood, the cold metal seeping through his thin shirt, his breath fogging in the chill as he muttered under his breath, "Gotta make it work. Always do." The lot was a desolate stretch of cracked asphalt, bordered by the neon glow of the bar across the street and the faint hum of traffic on the highway beyond. A no-man's land where the night shift ended and the struggle for survival picked back up with the dawn. He was lost in the rhythm of counting, each bill a fragile thread in the tapestry of his family's existence, when the bar door swung open and Rawls staggered out, his polished veneer crumbling under the weight of too much whiskey. Rawls' loafers scuffed the pavement with a drunken swagger, his broad frame swaying as he gripped the neck of an empty bottle, its amber contents long since drained. He raised it high, a sloppy salute to the night, before smashing it against the curb with a force that sent glass shards skittering like brittle stars across the asphalt. The sound a sharp crack that pierced the stillness and snapped Malik's head up, his dark eyes narrowing as he straightened against the Chevy. "You get your lazy ass out of my way." Rawls slurred, his voice a whip cracking through the damp air, thick with contempt as he stumbled closer, his bloodshot eyes locking onto Malik with a glare that carried years of ingrained disdain. Malik froze, his hands pausing mid-count, the crumpled bills crinkling in his grip as he met Rawls' stare. Not with defiance, but with a weary calm honed from too many nights swallowing insults to keep this job. "Ain't in your way, Mr. Rawls. Just heading out," he said, his voice low and measured, a practiced tone that kept the peace without bending too far. Rawls sneered, his lips curling into a grimace as he waved a meaty hand, dismissing Malik like a fly buzzing too close to his kingdom. "Don't give me that, shiftless, all of you, hanging around my lot like vultures," he muttered, his words sloshing together as he fumbled with his keys, the jangle a discordant note in the quiet. Malik stepped aside, his boots scuffing the gravel. Not worth the fight, but as Rawls turned toward his sedan, a sleek black machine parked crookedly a few paces away. The keys slipped from his unsteady fingers, clinking onto the asphalt with a soft, metallic chime that seemed to echo louder than it should in the still night air. The sedan's door swung open, Rawls too drunk to notice, and Malik's sharp eyes caught it. A glint of steel in a glove box, the unmistakable curve of pistol's grip catching the street lamp's faint glow, its presence a cold slap of danger that sent a shiver racing down his spine. His breath hitched, the bills forgotten as he stared at the gun, a stark intruder in this mundane moment. What's he doing with that? The question flashing through his mind like a warning flare. Rawls bent to snatch the keys, oblivious, his thick fingers fumbling as he cursed under his breath. Damn rain. Damn everything. Malik's heart thudded, a steady drumbeat of unease as he processed the sight. Rawls, the man who signed his checks, who barked orders and sneered at his kind, carrying a weapon in a glove box like it was nothing more than a spare pen. The implications swirled: danger, power, a glimpse into a side of Rawls he'd never seen, but always sensed lurking beneath the surface of his polished authority. "Nice piece," Malik said, his voice low, testing the waters as he nodded toward the sedan, his calm masking the pulse racing under his skin. Rawls froze mid-stoop, his head snapping up, his bloodshot eyes narrowing into slits as a flicker of panic broke through his drunken haze. "Shut your damn mouth. Mind your own business, boy," he snapped, his voice rising with a sharp edge, his hand darting toward the keys as if they could erase what Malik had seen. He lunged forward, stumbling slightly, his broad frame casting a shadow over Malik as he jabbed a finger inches from his chest. "You didn't see nothing. Get that through your thick skull, or I'll make sure you don't work another day in this town." The threat landed like a punch, heavy with the weight of Rawls' power. The power to hire, to fire, to ruin a man's life with a single phone call, and Malik's jaw tightened, his hands clenching around the bills as he swallowed the urge to shove back, to fight, to demand answers for the gun that loomed like a silent threat between them. Malik stepped back, his boots crunching gravel, the damp air clinging to his skin as he muttered, "Ain't worth it," and turned toward the Chevy, his mind spinning with the gun's glint, Rawls' threat, and the fragile thread of his family's survival hanging in the balance. He'd faced Rawls' barbs before. Lazy, shiftless, useless, words thrown like stones to keep him in his place. But this was different, heavier, a shadow of violence lurking behind the man's authority that made Malik's stomach churn with a mix of fear and fury. He slid into the driver's seat, the engine sputtering to life with a reluctant growl, when Rawls' voice cut through again, slurring but sharp. "You're lucky I don't call the cops. Keep your nose out of my business, Turner, or I'll bury you." Malik didn't look back. He drove, the lot shrinking in his rear view, but the weight of that night pressed harder, a coal smoldering his chest as he whispered to the empty cab, One day, man. One day you'll see. Days blurred into nights. Malik stocking shelves at the mart with a rhythm born of habit. Tuna cans, soup tins, rows of order carved from chaos. But Rawls' presence loomed larger, his broad silhouette stalking the aisles, his voice barking insults that stung deeper after the lot's confrontation. "Pick up the pace, Turner. My grandma moves faster, and she's half dead." Rawls snapped one dawn, his breath sour with coffee and last night's whiskey, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum as he loomed over Malik, who knelt to stack a lower shelf, his dark hands steady despite the tremor of anger rippling beneath his skin. Malik nodded, silent. Keep the job, keep the peace, but the coal in his chest flared hotter, fed by the memory of the gun, the keys, the sneer that branded him less than human. That same dawn, as the first light crept through the mart's grimy windows, Rawls turned to berate a cashier. Miss Ellen, a gray-haired black woman who'd worked there longer than Malik, his voice rising with a venom that echoed through the empty store. "You're all the same, slow, sloppy, costing me money," he bellowed, his meaty hand slamming a clipboard onto the counter, the sound of gunshot in the stillness. Malik paused, a can of peas hovering in his grip, when the shelf beside Rawls creaked. A low, ominous groan that turned his head just as the towering stack of metal and goods tilted, cans teetering like dominoes poised to fall, a cascade of steel and weight crashing toward Rawls' oblivious frame. Time slowed. Malik saw it, felt it, the shelf buckling under its own load. An instinct kicked in, overriding the coal of resentment burning in his gut. He lunged, his hands shot out, dark and sinewy, catching the shelf's edge with a grunt, his arms straining as the weight bore down, muscles bulging under his faded shirt, kins thudding around him like hailstones as he held firm. Rawls stumbled back, his broad face paling, his bloodshot eyes widening in shock as the shelf groaned, Malik's grip the only barrier between him and a crushed skull. "Get away, don't touch me." Rawls had roared moments before, but now he froze, his breath hitching, his hands flailing uselessly as Malik steadied the structure, sweat beading on his brow, his chest heaving with the effort as the laskin clattered to the floor, silence descending like a heavy curtain over the chaos. Malik stood, his hands dropping to his sides, kin scattered at his feet like fallen soldiers, his voice low but firm as he met Rawls' stunned gaze. "Could have killed you. Watch your damn shells, man." The words hung there, not a taunt but a fact, delivered with a calm that belied the storm swirling inside him. Anger at Rawls' hate, pride in his own strength, a flicker of something new. Power, earned in a split second of action. Rawls blinked, his mouth opening and closing. No sneer left, just a raw, unguarded shock breaking through the mask of authority he'd worn so long. He caught it. "He saved me." His breath ragged as he slumped against the counter, the clipboard forgotten, his polished world cracked by the hands he'd scorned. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as Rawls stared at Malik, his broad chest rising and falling, his ruddy face flushed with a mix of shock and something softer, bewilderment perhaps, or the first faint stirrings of shame. Malik turned away, bending to gather the scattered cans, his hands moving with the same steady rhythm he'd honed over years, each tin a brick in the wall he'd built to shield his family from a world that too often saw them as less. Rawls' voice rasped, breaking the quiet, a low croak that sounded foreign without its usual bite. "Wait, Turner, hold up." Malik paused, a can of corn in his grip, his dark eyes lifting to meet Rawls, not with defiance, but with a quiet wariness, braced for the next insult, the next shove back into the shadows. Rawls straightened, his meaty hands gripping the counter's edge, his voice gruff but stripped of its venom, a roughness that carried a question he'd never thought to ask. "Why'd you do it? Why'd you catch it, after all the shit I've said?" The words hung there, raw and unguarded, a crack in the armor of a man who'd spent years wielding power like a club, and Malik felt the coal in his chest shift, not cooling but settling, a weight he could carry without breaking. He shrugged, his broad shoulders rolling under the faded shirt, his voice low and steady, cutting through the hum of the lights with a truth as simple as it was profound. It's who I am. Don't matter what you think of me. Shell falls, I catch it. That's it. He turned back to the cans, stacking them with a rhythm that spoke of years weathering storms bigger than Rawls' hate, his hands moving with a grace that belied the exhaustion etched into every line of his frame. Rawls stared, his bloodshot eyes tracing the motion, the strength, the quiet dignity of a man he dismissed as nothing, a grunt, a shadow, until this dawn, when those hands had held up more than a shelf. They'd held up a mirror, forcing him to look at the man he'd been. The next day, Rawls lingered at the mart, unusual for a man who breezed in and out, barking orders from a distance. He watched Malik work, his broad frame hunched over a broom, then a stack of soup cans, his hands a blur of efficiency that Rawls had never bothered to see. "Turner," Rawls called, his voice gruff but lacking its usual edge, a tentative note threading through the gravel as he stepped closer, his polished shoes scuffing the linoleum. Malik turned, his dark eyes wary but steady, a can of green beans poised in his grip. Rawls cleared his throat, his meaty hand fumbling with a styrofoam cup of coffee, black, steaming, before thrusting it toward Malik with a jerk. "Here, take it," he muttered, no smirk, no sneer, just an awkward offering dangling between them like a flag of truce. Malik took it, the warmth seeping into his calloused palm, his fingers curling around the cup as he nodded, a flicker of surprise breaking through his guarded calm. He's never done this. The gesture small but seismic, a crack widening in the wall Rawls had built between them. "Thanks," Malik said, his voice low, steady, the word carrying no grovel, just acknowledgement, and he sipped, the bitterness of the brew, a faint echo of the bitterness he'd swallowed for years under Rawls' scorn. Weeks stretched into a rhythm. Malik stocked, Rawls watched, his broad silhouette a constant now, his barks softening into grunts, then nods. One dusk, Rawls called him over, his voice rough but stripped of venom. "Turner, my truck's rack snapped. Fix it, will ya?" "You're good. Damn good." Malik nodded, toolbox clanking as he worked. Bolts tightened, steel aligned. Rawls hovering, his bloodshot eyes tracing every move, a quiet of a breaking through the haze of a man who'd never looked twice. "You're a worker. Better in half my crew," Rawls said, his voice gruff, almost grudging, but his eyes clear, a spark of respect glinting where disdain had once ruled. "He sees me now," a shift Malik felt in his bones, a weight lifting as he wiped grease from his hands, the truck humming with his repair. The change crept slow but steady, like dawn breaking over Carver Heights' cracked skyline. Malik's shifts at the mart stretched smoother, his hands moving with the same rhythm, but the air lighter, the insults gone, replaced by a gruff nod from Rawls as he passed. "A good work, Turner," slipping out one morning, rough but real. Paychecks grew, raises slipped in, not much, but enough to fix the Chevy's rattling muffler, to buy Jaden a new pair of sneakers that didn't pinch, to ease the lines on Tasha's face as she smiled over dinner, her voice soft with pride. "You're keeping us going, Malik." "Always have," she said, her hand squeezing his, the warmth of balm against years of cold shoulders from men like Rawls. Jaden bragged at school, his small chest puffed with a grin that lit up their trailer. "Dad's the best at the mart. Mr. Rawls says so." His words a melody Malik hadn't dared hope to hear, a tune of worth echoing through the tin walls where dreams had too often withered. Carver Heights buzzed with whispers. Rawls turned, treats Turner right now. The lot's flickering street lamp casting a new glow, not just on Malik's junker, but on a man who'd stood unseen for too long. Rawls lingered more, his broad frame a fixture at dawn, his polished shoes scuffing the linoleum as he watched Malik stack shelves. Tins of soup, cans of peas, rows of order rising from the chaos of spilled hate. One crisp morning, Rawls approached, his meaty hands stuffed in his pockets, his voice rough but stripped of its old venom, a gravelly warmth threading through as he stood beside Malik, watching him align a row of corn cans with a precision that spoke of years holding steady under pressure. "Turner, you're a hell of a worker. You know that," he said, his bloodshot eyes clear for once. No sneer, no shadow, just a raw honesty that caught Malik off guard. A crack in the wall, so wide it let light flood through. He means it, a shift that settled deep in Malik's chest, not erasing the coal of past hurts, but banking it with something new, something earned. Malik nodded, a faint smile tugging his lips, his hands pausing mid-stack as he met Rawls' gaze, his voice steady, carrying a weight that stretched beyond that dawn. "Thanks, Mr. Rawls, just doing my job," he said, the words simple but heavy, a bridge built not from groveling, but from the quiet strength of a man who'd caught more than a shelf. He'd caught a chance to be seen. Rawls clapped his shoulder, a quick, awkward pat, then turned away, his broad frame retreating to the office. But the echo of that touch lingered, a mark of a man who'd never again see Malik or Carver Heights as less. The lot stood quiet now, the Chevy's engine purring smoother with fresh gas, the street lamps flicker a beacon over Malik's nightly count. $20 this time, a small raise stacking hope atop survival. Tasha met him at the door one dawn, her arms wrapping tight, her voice a whisper against his ear, "You're my rock, Malik, always will be," and Jaden's laughter spilled from the trailer, a sound brighter than the dawn breaking over the heights. Rawls' truck rolled past, no slurs scrawled on its flank, just a nod through the window, a silent salute to a man whose hands had shifted more than steel. They'd shifted a heart, dismantling hate one steady shelf at a time.